Hello, everybody. Dr. F Scott Feil here, and I wanted to give you a quick update on our main sponsor, Ice Shaker. If you're looking for a water bottle, a coffee cup, a protein shaker bottle, I have great news. Your search has ended. Ice Shaker has shaker bottles, tumblers, sports bottles, and the newest addition, and my personal favorite, the gallon and half-gallon jugs. These bad boys are both massive and sturdy and keep drinks cold for hours on end. This has been my answer to making sure I drink enough water throughout my day. I've still kind of come around to the protein game and I'm new at it still, but when my doctor advised me to increase my protein intake, I turned to powdered shakes. Every other shaker bottle on the market had its issues, but Ice Shaker is the only one I tried that was vacuum sealed, had no issues with clumps or smell, and it really kept my drinks the right temperature. I love this product and I love the company and the guys behind it as they are doing amazing things and simply winning. Not only in the world of shaker bottles and sports bottles and tumblers, but in the game of life. Their partnerships and charitable donations have not gone unnoticed by the Professors of Profit Pops crew. So if you want the best beverage consumption and protein shaker solution on the market, check out the link in our show notes to grab yours today. You can even customize them with laser engraving, just like I've got here for our pteducator.com, right? And, I promise you won't be disappointed with these stainless steel products. They're all colors, all sizes. You've got to check them out. Ice Shaker, let's shake things up.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Professors of Profit Vlogcast. I'm your host, Dr. F Scott Feil, and I've got with me a longtime friend now, Dr. Jasmine Marcus. She's been on a couple of the podcasts a couple times, so glad to have her back on. And Jasmine, you do a lot with writing, which I love. I mean, obviously being an English major, reformed English major, I love to see anybody who can incorporate writing into a business. So tell us a little bit about where you're at currently, because I know you do a lot of stuff with resume reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Lord knows a lot of these new grads need these days. So tell us a little bit about that and how you kind of get into that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. So I've been a physical therapist now for a little over 8 years, but before going into PT, I was focused on journalism and was in that field for about a year. And so I've just sort of kept combining the two. So right now I am in the clinic twice a week as a PT in an outpatient part of the hospital. And then I kind of leave my other days open for a few different things. So I edit essays for people applying to PT school, which does include a bit of resume review. And then I do a little bit of freelance writing. And then I leave myself open as an expert source. So someone, let's say, most recently was writing an article about back pain, but they need to quote people in it. I can be one of the people who they'll quote, giving a little bit more of like an expert background on how to treat back pain. So I do a bunch of different things.
Yeah, I love it. I love the idea of, again, just using our creativity in conjunction with our education and our background to get these opportunities, right? Because there's a ton of opportunities out there. And I feel like physical therapists and rehab folks in general are pretty creative people. I mean, we're constantly having to come up with new and inventive ways to adapt equipment, to adapt exercises, to adapt plans of care, so we're always kind of problem solving. And I feel like our creativity sometimes gets almost limited to those things when in reality, we can use our creativity for all this other stuff, so what is it about, the writing and utilizing your skill sets, especially in journalism, that really, sparked your interest and kept the creativity going into these other avenues?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold. So I really enjoy working with people applying to PT school because I remember going through it. I didn't really know anyone who had done it recently, and it's a very confusing process. So I like kind of being the person who can help people. And I like feeling like I played a small part in like all these future PTs, like careers and futures, which is really cool to think about. And then I also like the other part of what I what I do is I'm just really passionate about getting better information out there, because I think we all know, like, you can go on Google and read articles and you can find all this garbage on the internet. And so I really like the idea of getting better information out to people, whether it's through the articles or just being quoted and trying to sort of leave people with, things that work or an idea on where to go for resources better than maybe what you'll just find if you go on any random website.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. There is a lot of misinformation and disinformation these days. So having trusted sources is definitely helpful. Well, let's start with this. Let's talk a little bit about like resumes in general, right? Like if you're reviewing resumes, like what are some things that common mistakes you see or things that people do maybe incorrectly, or like what are things you're looking for in a good resume?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is sort of things that maybe if you go to like your parents and you say like, help me with my resume, there's like a few things that they might tell you to put on that like more recently people don't put on resumes anymore. So things like your hobbies, your references, even address, like there's no real reason to put your address on a resume anymore. You definitely need contact information, but we don't need like your mailing address. Definitely don't need hobbies on there. References people will usually ask for, they don't have to go on your resume. So those are kind of like the big things, is just things that are a little bit outdated. A lot of times people just go into a little too much detail. So a good rule of thumb is that you should have about 1 page for every 10 years of experience that you've had, give or take. But sometimes, I'm getting like someone applying to PT school, they're still in college, and they're sending me like a 3-page resume. And that's probably a little bit too long for someone who maybe hasn't even had a real job yet. So it's good to put things on your resume, but like maybe your participation in a club doesn't need, 6 different lines attached to it. So sort of knowing like what to emphasize, what not to emphasize. A lot of it's just consistency. So, if you're listing the city that one position was in, you want to list the city that all your positions were in. If you're still at a job or still doing an activity, it should be present tense. Something that you're not doing anymore should be past tense. A lot of times people are sort of switching back and forth. Punctuation is a big thing. So sometimes people have like full sentences for some parts and not for others. So, which you shouldn't really have full sentences in a resume, but however you're doing it, you want to really be consistent the whole way through. And I think a big thing is just that, when I'm reading, a lot of times they'll have written about something one way here and a different way somewhere else. And, it kind of looks like a little bit messy when that happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the things that I've seen a lot lately, and I just want to get your take on this, like, I've had a lot of people interested in changing careers or making, career changes. Like for me, I went from, clinical to full-time academia, and that was a pretty drastic career change, even though I didn't recognize it as much at the time. But I did have to go from a resume to a CV, and I didn't really know what that was. So I had to get help on what a CV was and what it looked like, right? But even going from, say, like clinical physical therapist to patient case manager, something like that, right? Still related fields, but like a little bit different. And the resume may need to reflect that new opportunity and transition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I feel like people kind of maybe don't understand or miss out on when they make a change like that is to represent all their past and previous experiences and how it can help in the new position or field, like kind of showing like, hey, I did this, but it can translate to the new position I'm applying for in this way. What are your thoughts on that and like how to handle that?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a good point. Is you want to keep in mind when you write anything who your audience is. So your audience is going to be different if you're applying for maybe a non-clinical role compared to sending your resume to a physical therapist for a physical therapist role. So I'm sure you were writing differently, depending on which position you're applying to. And then, yeah, I think that's another thing with the people who I work with is sometimes they're like, well, should I put this? Should I not? And in general, what I always hear when I talk to people who are like reviewing essays or reviewing applications is, they're not going to know something if you don't include it. So usually you want to err on the side of including something rather than not including it, because it could be something really relevant, or it could be even, something random you have in common with the person, or it could be something helpful, but you'll never know if you don't include it because, they'll just have no way of knowing about it.
Yeah, it's like documentation, right? If you didn't document it, it didn't happen, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah, no, I love that point. All right, so let's talk a little bit then about, like, you know, the essay writing portion of things, right? So you also help folks with, you know, writing essays for applications to schools and whatnot, right? Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that experience and what that's been like in your highlights there.
Yeah. So like I said, that's just really a fun way for me to kind of give back and be involved with the people who are entering the profession. And this year, there's a new, the prompt changes about every 2 or 3 years. This year, as maybe you know, but people listening might not know, there's a cool new prompt that I really like a lot, which is sort of giving people the opportunity to talk about what makes them unique and talk about their background. So it's been really fun for me to read all of those and sort of feel like I'm getting to know the person who I'm working with, because the prompt for the 3 years before this was about what confirmed physical therapy for you. So everyone sort of wrote the same story about, seeing something when they were shadowing, which got boring after even just a few of them.
Sure.
So it's been fun to kind of read kind of like the next iteration of it and see, just see what makes people unique. And I've gotten so many cool stories. Just, we're only like a month into this cycle.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what tips or tricks or pointers do you have for somebody who maybe wants to start a side business and really use their creativity and their writing skills to kind of supplement their income with another business?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just looking towards maybe what you're good at and what your strengths are, and not necessarily jumping into whatever seems easy. So for example, I've seen, I sort of keep track of what other people are doing. So every year I'll see like a few people kind of jump in saying like, oh, I got into PT school and now I'm going to edit essays. And, maybe those people don't have anything that really qualifies them to edit essays, except for the fact that they happen to write one and get in. And inevitably those people are kind of gone in a year or two. So I think and I'm sure, other guests of yours have said this, it's not necessarily finding just a business you can do, but finding something that you're good at that really matches your skill set. And so, writing and editing are two different skill sets. But there is so much you can do with writing, especially. There's such a need for people who can communicate science and physical therapy well. So like we've talked about before, like the freelance writing is great, but there's so much else you can do with it. You can start a blog for the company you work for. You can do social media posts for the company you work for. Start a newsletter. There's so many different ways. If you have the writing skills, there's so many different directions that you can take it in.
Yeah, and you make a very good point there too, that writing and editing are two separate skills. However, one of the things you've kind of done a good job with is stacking skill sets, and I think that becomes super important because it helps, I don't want to say recession proof you, but the more skill sets you have, the more adaptable you are, the more options you have, right? So, optionality becomes a real strength when things get tough. Obviously, you can't predict a pandemic, right? Those things happen. It's like, holy cow, nobody saw that coming, right? But if, physical therapy, which we thought was bulletproof, right? And it was just this amazing field, and yet people still got furloughed, people still got laid off, right? Well, if you have the skill sets of being able to write, then yeah, you could pivot into writing in medical profession stuff, into blogging, into newsletters, into all that other stuff, into writing or editing by stacking those skill sets. So, a part of it, I think, goes back to just wanting to be a lifelong learner. I think we should all kind of strive to that. And like you said, having whatever your skill set is, right? Whatever your passion is, I think that's super important, because like you said, if it's not, then basically you have this skill set of, well, what do I do if I'm good at this and I want to keep going with it, right? If you can do that and keep going with it, that becomes then the passion, the thing you can keep continuing on with. So just something to think about. We got your back. So yeah, I was just saying that, it becomes a passion thing where you have to enjoy it, be good at it, and be passionate about it in order to keep going with it. Especially if you're going to make it a business and try to stick with it. So
For
I think
sure.
that becomes important. Well, Jasmine, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences and your side business with us. Where can people reach out to you and find you if they have, more questions about the business or what you're up to, and, just want to see about getting some help with resume or essay writing stuff?
Yeah. So the best place is probably my website, which is just my name, jasminemarcus.com. You can also email me, marcusdpt@gmail.com. And then I'm at Instagram at the PT.
Excellent. And we will put all those links in the show notes so everyone can find you easily. Jasmine, thank you so much again. Always a pleasure to catch up with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.